The river roared like a beast in the night, white foam churning over jagged rocks, and the cold water cut into Marla and June's skin like knives. Their hands were bound tightly with coarse, rough ropes, each knot biting into their wrists. The sisters, both 30, struggled in vain, their dresses soaked and heavy, dragging them deeper into the current. Panic made their lungs burn as they gasped for air, each breath sharp and desperate. The river had become a merciless trap carrying them toward jagged stones that could shatter bones with a single strike. And all this horror had been orchestrated by the one person they had once trusted more than anyone, their brother. His greed had grown like a poisonous vine, twisting the bonds of family into something cold, heartless, and cruel. The land dispute had escalated beyond words. It had become an obsession. He had watched them, planned this moment, and now the river was his weapon. The sisters' hearts sank as they realized the full magnitude of his betrayal. Marla flailed her legs, trying to keep her head above the water, but the river's current was merciless. June's long brown hair plastered across her face, blinding her as she kicked violently, each movement heavy and exhausting. "Help! Someone please!" Marla screamed, her voice cracking in fear. Her sister echoed the cries, her voice hoarse and desperate, swallowed almost immediately by the relentless rush of water. But the river offered no mercy, only an icy embrace that threatened to drag them into its depths forever. The moon hung low in the sky, a cold silver witness to the horror unfolding below. Its pale light reflected off the frothy surface of the oven reflected off the frothy surface of the river, illuminating the sisters' faces in stark relief, the wide, terrified eyes, the taut muscles straining against the ropes, the helplessness etched into every line. The wind carried a whisper through the trees lining the bank, as if nature itself recoiled in horror at the act of betrayal. Suddenly, a shadow moved on the river bank. Marla's heart lurched. At first, she thought it was a trick of the moonlight, a reflection of her desperate imagination. But the figure stepped forward, muscles glistening in the silver light, bronzed skin taut, long black hair flowing freely over broad shoulders, and a series of tribal necklaces clinking softly with every step. The warrior's eyes locked onto the struggling sisters, calm and focused, as if he had been waiting for this precise moment. He did not hesitate. With a single powerful bound, he leapt into the icy water, sending splashes flying like a storm of glittering shards. The sisters' cries rose in hope and confusion as the warrior cut through the current, each stroke a demonstration of raw strength and skill. His hands were steady, his gaze unwavering, and a sense of protection radiated from him like a shield. Marla tried to move toward him, but the ropes hindered every effort, the knots cutting deeper into her flesh with each pull. June's legs kicked frantically, the icy water sapping her strength. The warrior's long arms reached them just in time, his hands gripping the ropes to loosen them, his fingers moving with expert precision. "Hold on, I've got you," he shouted, voice strong and commanding, cutting through the roar of the river. The sisters clung to him as if their lives depended on it, because they did. The current surged violently, tossing the trio as if the river itself were trying to resist his intrusion. But the warrior did not falter. Every movement was purposeful, each stroke a battle against nature itself. He wrapped an arm around Marla and another around June, his powerful muscles flexing under the moonlight, pulling them inch by inch toward the safety of the muddy riverbank. Their wet dresses clung to their skin, and shivers racked their bodies. But the warrior's steady grip offered a lifeline amidst the chaos. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they scraped onto the riverbank, gasping, shaking, and utterly drenched. Mud squelched beneath them, and water poured from their hair, mixing with tears of relief and lingering terror. The warrior quickly untied the ropes, his hands moving with a mix of urgency and tenderness. "You're safe now," he said, his eyes scanning the dark forest around them, alert to any lingering threat. Marla's lips trembled as she whispered, Our brother, he wanted the land." Her voice cracked, carrying the weight of betrayal, grief, and disbelief. June clutched her sister's arm, shivering violently as the reality of survival settled in. The warrior nodded solemnly, understanding the pain that words could not fully express. Around them, the river's roar slowly receded, replaced by the whisper of wind through the pines, the smell of wet earth, and the faint smoke from distant cabins. But the danger had not passed entirely. The Old West was unforgiving, and the sisters' ordeal was far from over. And yet, amidst the cold, the terror, and the betrayal, a flicker of hope remained. The warrior's presence was a promise that, even in a world filled with greed and danger, courage, strength, and honor could still protect those who had been wronged. The icy river seemed intent on claiming the sisters, tossing them like rag dolls over jagged rocks and pulling them toward whirlpools that twisted beneath the silver moonlight. Marla's fingers clawed at the ropes, but they were unforgiving, cutting deep into her skin with each desperate pull. Her lungs burned with every gasp, water filling her mouth and nose as the current snatched her under. June thrashed beside her, kicking frantically, her long brown hair streaming in the torrent, her eyes wide with terror. Each moment felt endless, the river a relentless predator ready to swallow them whole. Then, cutting through the roar of the water, came the figure of the warrior. His bronzed skin glistened in the moonlight, muscles taut and powerful as he moved with the precision of someone who had battled rivers, storms, and enemies countless times before. Long black hair streamed behind him like a banner, and the subtle clinking of turquoise and bone jewelry framed his presence, a strange melody against the chaos. Every movement was deliberate, strong, and unwavering, his eyes locked on the sisters as he assessed the dangerous current. "Hold on. I've got you," he shouted, his voice carrying over the water, filled with authority and assurance. The sisters' hearts leapt at the sound of lifeline in human form. Marla tried to reach for him, but the rope still bound her wrists, dragging her under again. June screamed, a sharp, terrified sound that mixed with the wind and the water. Almost swallowed by the river's roar, the warrior plunged fully into the torrent, his strong arms cutting through the icy water with practiced ease. Each stroke brought him closer to the struggling sisters, his chest rising and falling rhythmically despite the raging current. He reached Marla first, grabbing her with an iron grip that was firm but careful. "I have you," he repeated, his voice a lifeline in the darkness. His other arm extended toward June, who was flailing, panicked, and slipping beneath the churning waves. The sisters clung to him instinctively. The warrior's strength was immense, his movements fluid and deliberate. He twisted his body to absorb the river's force, his legs kicking with power, fighting against the violent current. Marla's teeth chattered from the cold, and she could barely move her bound hands, but the warrior held her with unwavering determination. He reached June's side, hooking an arm under her shoulders, lifting her head above the water with precision. Born of experience, the current fought them at every step, swirling around their legs, threatening to drag them back into the river's mouth. Rocks scraped against their skin, the water cold as steel. The sisters' wet dresses clung to them like second skins, weighing them down, but the warrior's iron grip and powerful strokes slowly carried them toward the muddy riverbank. With every surge, Marla and June felt themselves pulled back by the water's strength, but his presence was a shield, a promise that they would survive. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, their hands scraped against the muddy riverbank. The warrior's arms braced against the bank, using his strength. to pull the sisters from the water. They collapsed onto the wet soil, coughing, shivering, and gasping for air. Their hair hung in heavy, dripping strands plastered to their faces. Their eyes, wide and terrified just moments ago, now glistened with relief. The ropes still cut into their wrists, but the immediate danger had passed. The warrior's eyes scanned the surrounding darkness, alert for any additional threats. He knelt beside them, hands moving expertly to untie the ropes that had nearly claimed their lives. "You're safe now," he said, his voice calm, steady, and commanding. Marla rubbed at her wrists, wincing as the bruises and cuts burned, while June leaned against him, shivering violently, trying to find warmth from his steady presence. The smell of wet earth, pine, and river water filled the air. Moonlight glinted off the warriors' necklaces, silver and turquoise catching the light like tiny stars. Around them, the river's roar faded into a background hum, replaced by the distant call of a night bird and the rustle of trees in the wind. The sisters, once trapped by betrayal and water, now clung to the lifeline of this mysterious man who had appeared like an avenging spirit. Marla's lips trembled as she whispered, "Our brother. He tried to kill us." Her voice was filled with disbelief, grief, and the raw anger of someone betrayed by blood. June's hands gripped her sister's arm, trembling, her eyes reflecting both fear and gratitude. The warrior's gaze softened slightly, understanding the depth of their trauma without a word. His presence was more than strength, it was hope, courage, and the promise that even in a world as harsh and unforgiving as the Old West, justice and protection could still exist. Even as they caught their breath, they knew the threat was not fully over. But at this moment, they were alive, and that fragile victory was enough to ignite a spark of hope that had almost been extinguished by greed, betrayal, and the icy embrace of the river. Mud squelched beneath their trembling bodies as Marla and June collapsed on the riverbank, gasping for air, shivering violently. Their soaked dresses clung to their frames like heavy sheets of wet fabric, and their long hair hung in dark, dripping strands across their faces. The ropes that had nearly claimed their lives had left deep, angry marks on their wrists, and the sisters rubbed them, trying to soothe the stinging pain. The icy river behind them still roared, a reminder of the narrow escape they had survived. Warrior knelt beside them, his shirtless body dripping with water, muscles taut and bronzed in the moonlight, long black hair falling over his shoulders. He worked quickly and efficiently, loosening the ropes with skilled hands. Bone, silver, and turquoise tribal jewelry jingled softly with each movement, a strange, calming melody in the tense night. "You're safe now," he said in a voice that was firm, calm, and commanding. There was no false reassurance in his tone, only truth. Marla's lips trembled as she whispered, "Our brother, he wanted the land." The words trembled on her lips, heavy with grief, disbelief, and anger. June's hand gripped her sister's arm, shivering uncontrollably. I can't believe he would," she stammered, voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. The warrior's eyes scanned the dark riverbank, alert to any lingering threat, his expression calm but wary. He understood too well that betrayal of blood often came with more than just one attempt. The forest lining the riverbank seemed alive with sound, the rush of water, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. The scent of wet pine and earthy mud filled the air, mingling with the metallic tang of the river. Despite their exhaustion, the sisters couldn't relax. Fear still pulsed through their veins like electricity. The knowledge of their brother's greed and cruelty, pressing heavily on their minds. The warrior pulled a blanket from his pack and wrapped it around the shivering sisters. Marla leaned into it, grateful for the warmth, and June rested her head on the warrior's arm, feeling, for the first time that night, a shred of safety. "Thank you," Marla whispered, tears streaking her face. June echoed the sentiment, voice barely audible, almost lost in the night air. The warrior only nodded, his eyes flicking toward the shadows, scanning the tree line, the riverbank, and the surrounding darkness. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes made all three tense. The sisters froze, hearts pounding, and the warrior rose. To his full height, muscles flexing under the moonlight, chest bare and glistening from the river. Long black hair framed a face of calm determination. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the darkness, hand hovering near a knife at his belt. Then the river's roar faded slightly, replaced by the tense hush of the night forest, as if nature itself held its breath. Marla's mind raced. "What if he comes back?" she whispered, fear threading every syllable. The warrior's gaze softened slightly, acknowledging her terror. "Then we'll face him," he said simply. There was no bravado in his words, only certainty. "But tonight you survived. That is what matters." His presence was magnetic, commanding respect and inspiring courage. Even in the terror of betrayal and near death, June shivered, wrapping herself closer to the warrior. Her body was still trembling from the cold and adrenaline, but slowly her breaths began to even out. The river behind them, though still fierce, no longer seemed like an immediate predator. Yet the sisters knew the danger was far from over. Their brother's greed would not stop at one failed attempt. The land he desired had become a weapon, and he would come again. The warrior sat down beside them, still vigilant, keeping them close as a shield. "Tell me everything," he said, quietly, "everything that led to this." And so, trembling, the sisters recounted the events, the land dispute, the escalating greed, the cruel decision to throw them into the river. Their voices wavered, but the warrior listened, nodding, understanding the deep betrayal of blood, blood. The warrior listened, nodding, understanding the deep betrayal of blood, the kind that cuts deeper than any rope. Above them, the moon hung low and silver in the sky, casting pale light across the muddy riverbank. The drenched sisters and the warrior who had pulled them from death. For the first time that night, Marla and June allowed themselves to believe in hope. The river had nearly claimed them, betrayal had nearly ended them, but in the heart of the Old West, courage, honor, and strength had arrived to shield them. And though the danger had passed for now, all three understood silently. The night was far from over, the river was far from calm, and the brother who had betrayed them was still out there. Survival was only the beginning. The river's roar faded behind them, leaving only the crunch of wet mud beneath their feet and the rustle of the wind through the pine trees. Marla and June sat huddled together on the bank, wrapped in the warrior's blanket, shivering violently. Their faces were pale, teeth chattering, and eyes wide with lingering fear. Even after surviving the icy river and the ropes that had threatened to end their lives, another danger loomed, one closer, more personal, and far more insidious. A sudden movement in the shadows snapped their attention toward the ridge above. The riverbank. Marla's breath caught in her throat. There, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, was the familiar figure of their brother. His stance was rigid, the barrel of a pistol glinting in the silver light. Greed and fury twisted his face into a mask of rage. The sisters froze, terror knitting their muscles tight. The river's cold had been merciful compared to the fire of betrayal that burned in his eyes. "You think you can escape me?" he shouted, voice sharp and venomous. "That land belongs to me, and I'll take it, by blood if I must." The words sliced through the night like bullets themselves. Marla instinctively clutched June's hand, fear mingling with disbelief. How had their own blood turned so cruel, so merciless? The warrior rose slowly to his full height, his bronze chest gleaming under the moonlight, water droplets cascading. Down-taut muscles. Long black hair framed a calm, yet formidable face. His dark eyes locked onto the brother with the precision of a hunter stalking prey. Bone, turquoise, and silver tribal jewelry jingled softly with each movement, a melodic counterpoint to the tense silence that followed the brother's threat. "Step back," the warrior commanded, voice steady and full of authority, cutting through the tension. His hands hovered near the knife at his belt, ready, but his posture suggested control rather than reckless aggression. "Your greed ends tonight." The brother sneered, the pistol raised higher. "And who are you to stop? Me? A savage from the wilderness? You can't." He never finished the sentence. The warrior moved with a speed that seemed almost supernatural, rolling to the side to avoid a hasty shot. The mud beneath them splattered with each movement, the sister's eyes wide as adrenaline and fear surged through them. In a flash, the warrior lunged, knocking the pistol from the brother's hands with a precision strike. The weapon skidded across the wet ground, and the brother stumbled back, stunned. The warrior's movements were a blend of raw power and practiced technique, his muscles coiling and uncoiling like steel springs, his expression focused and deadly. Marla and June pressed against each other, hearts pounding, eyes darting from the warrior to their brother. The tension in the air was palpable, each second stretching into an eternity. The Old West night seemed to hold its breath, the river now a silent witness to the battle of wills unfolding on the bank. The brother, enraged, lunged at the warrior, claws and fists flailing, but the warrior's reflexes were unmatched. He dodged, twisted, and countered, a series of controlled movements that disarmed and subdued without unnecessary cruelty. Each strike, each movement, was precise as though he had trained his entire life for moments such as this, protecting the innocent, facing treachery, standing as a bulwark against injustice. Finally, with a deft maneuver, the warrior brought the brother to the muddy ground. He pinned him, muscles taut, face close to the terrified man. The brother struggled, gasping, face flushed with fury and humiliation. "Do you understand now?" The warrior said, voice low, controlled, but heavy with warning. "You threaten family with betrayal and death. That ends tonight." The sisters, though exhausted, could hardly tear their eyes from the scene. Relief mingled with awe as the warrior's presence radiated both protection and authority. Marla whispered to June, trembling, We're safe because of him." June nodded, still shivering, leaning slightly into the warrior's side for comfort. The brother, defeated and humiliated, lay sprawled in the mud, the realization of his failure and the warrior's dominance settling like a cold weight on his chest. The river, once a potential grave, now mirrored the warrior's strength and courage. Nature itself seemed to recognize the shift. The wind whispered through the pines. The river slowed, and the night held a tense calm, broken only by the heavy breaths of those who had survived the storm. The sisters knew that while tonight they were safe, the betrayal that had set these events in motion would leave lasting scars. But for now, at least, the warrior had carved a line between them and death, between greed and justice. And that line, drawn in courage and strength, was unbreakable. The riverbank was eerily silent now, the only sounds the distant rustle of pine trees and the soft gurgle of the river as it flowed past jagged rocks. Marla and June pressed themselves tightly against the damp earth, their blankets wrapped around them, eyes wide and locked on the tense standoff. The brother's pistol lay on the mud, wet and useless, a symbol of his desperation and failure. But desperation is a dangerous thing, and the sisters knew all too well that he would not give up so easily. The warrior's bare chest glistened under the moonlight, muscles taut, long black hair streaming behind him. His eyes never left the brother, calm and calculating, yet ready for any sudden move. The bone, silver, and turquoise jewelry around his neck and wrists caught the moonlight, casting tiny reflections like stars across the muddy bank. Every movement he made was deliberate, a blend of raw strength and disciplined skill honed over years of survival and combat. Suddenly, the brother lunged, fury and fear giving him wild strength. His fists swung in erratic arcs, each strike fueled by anger and greed, but the warrior was faster. He twisted his body, dodging with the fluidity of a predator and countering with precision. Each movement carried weight and power. Every punch, kick, and grapple was controlled yet forceful. The mud squelched beneath their feet, water splashed into the air with each movement, and the sisters' hearts pounded as they watched the deadly dance unfold. The brother swung again, clumsy and erratic. The warrior grabbed his arm mid-swing, twisting it and sending him stumbling backward into the shallow water at the river's edge. Mud and water splashed up, soaking both men, but the warrior's grip never faltered. With a powerful shove, he pinned the brother against a tree, chest rising and falling steadily despite the exertion. "Enough," the warrior said, voice low, unwavering, echoing across the riverbank. "This ends now." The brother's face contorted with rage. "You think you've won?" He spat, struggling against the warrior's iron hold. "I will take what is mine, no matter the cost." But even as he fought, it was clear he was outmatched. The warrior's muscles coiled and uncoiled with supernatural precision, his bronzed skin glistening in the moonlight, every move calculated to subdue rather than kill. With a deft kick, he disarmed the brother completely, sending him sprawling into the mud. Defeated and exhausted, Marla and June let out quiet breaths of relief, unable to tear their eyes away from the scene. The warrior's presence was magnetic, a beacon of protection and courage. Their limbs still shook from the cold and adrenaline, but now that shaking was tinged with awe. He saved us," Marla whispered, her voice trembling with gratitude. June nodded, her eyes glistening, leaning into the protective presence of the warrior who had rescued them not once, but twice from the river and from the brother's rage. The brother, humiliated and panting, tried to rise, but the warrior's hand pressed him firmly into the mud. "You will harm no one," he said firmly. "Your greed has ended here." The moonlight highlighted the intense determination in the warrior's face, his long hair cascading over his shoulders, eyes burning with righteous fury. The brother knew, at that moment, that he had lost not only to strength, but to honor, discipline, and the courage that cannot be broken. Around them, the Old West night seemed to exhale, the tension in the air slowly releasing. The river continued its endless flow, indifferent to human struggles, but the forest held its breath, witnessing a battle of blood and betrayal end without death. The sisters felt the weight of survival settle onto their shoulders, heavy yet comforting. They were safe, alive, and free from the immediate threat of their brother's cruelty. The warrior released the brother, letting him slump to the ground, defeated and humiliated. He turned back to the sisters, wrapping the blanket tighter around their shoulders. "You are safe now," he said again, softer this time, his voice carrying warmth amidst the cold, muddy night. Marla and June pressed their faces into the warmth of the blanket and the warrior's presence, drawing strength from him as he knelt beside them, ever vigilant. In the distance, the first hints of dawn began to touch the horizon, pale streaks of gold against the dark sky. The river, once a deadly force, now flowed peacefully past jagged rocks, reflecting the warrior's strength and the fragile hope of a new beginning. Marla and June, exhausted but alive, finally allowed themselves a breath of relief. They knew the road ahead would be difficult. The betrayal of family leaves scars that run deep, but with the warrior by their side, survival, and perhaps a chance at justice were finally within reach. The first rays of dawn began filtering through the trees, painting the muddy riverbank in soft shades of gold and amber. Marla and June, still wrapped in the warrior's thick blanket, shivered from a mixture of cold and lingering adrenaline. Their soaked dresses clung to their frames, and the bruises from the ropes and the river's rocks ached as a painful reminder of the night's terror. Yet, the immediate threat of their brother's wrath had passed. For the first time, the sisters allowed themselves to breathe. Though relief was tempered by lingering fear, the warrior remained vigilant, his bare, bronzed chest glistening with water, muscles coiled like springs even in rest. Long black hair fell over his shoulders, and the jingling of bone, silver, and turquoise jewelry seemed almost melodic in the quiet morning. He knelt beside the sisters, carefully checking that the ropes had not caused permanent injury and offering water from a small flask. Marla accepted it shakily, her fingers brushing against his large, calloused hands, and June followed, sipping slowly, still trembling. "You're safe for now," the warrior said, voice steady, calming, yet imbued with a quiet authority that seemed to settle the sisters' frayed nerves. He looked toward the distant forest, alert to any other dangers that might be lurking, as if the world itself could conspire against them. The air was thick with the scent of wet pine, river mud, and the faint smoke from fires in distant cabins. Every sound, the rustle of leaves, the soft lap of the river, even the chirping of early birds felt magnified, each one a reminder of how fragile safety could be in the untamed Old West. Marla shivered violently, drawing the blanket closer around her shoulders. I can't believe he tried to kill us," she whispered, voice low and trembling. June clutched her sister's arm, eyes brimming with tears. "He's our brother, our blood, and yet—" Her words faltered, lost in the weight of betrayal and disbelief. The warrior listened quietly, understanding the unspoken pain and rage that flowed beneath their words. He did not rush to offer platitudes. He knew some wounds ran too deep for mere words to heal. The sisters recounted the events leading up to the river, the disputes over the land, the brothers' escalating greed, and the final cruel decision to throw them into the icy waters. Each detail brought a fresh shiver, not from the cold, but from the realization of how near they had come to death. The warrior's eyes softened as he listened, a silent acknowledgment of their trauma. He had faced danger countless times, but the courage required to survive betrayal by family was a different battle entirely. For a long moment, the three sat in silence, the river's roar replaced by a gentle murmur as it flowed past the rocks. The sisters felt the weight of the night's events pressing down on them, the memory of cold water, rough ropes, and near death etched into every muscle, every nerve. Yet, in the warrior's presence, there was also a strange comfort, a quiet promise that they were no longer alone and that someone strong and honorable had intervened when all hope seemed lost. The warrior finally spoke, his voice low but firm. "You cannot go back to that land not safely. Your brother will not forgive failure or weakness. But there are other places, other paths. Freedom is in your hands now." Marla and June exchanged a glance, realizing the truth of his words. Survival meant leaving behind what they had known, what they had lost, and stepping into the unknown. But it also meant reclaiming life on their own terms, guided by courage and the protection they had found out as the morning light grew stronger. Mist rose from the river, curling around the warrior and the sisters in ethereal tendrils. The Old West, vast and unforgiving, stretched out before them, full of unknown dangers but also possibilities. Marla and June drew a deep breath, letting it fill their lungs, their hearts still pounding but steadier now. For the first time that night, hope mingled with fear, a fragile, persistent flame. The warrior offered them his hand, a gesture both protective and empowering. We move forward together, he said, eyes scanning the horizon for threats, yet filled with a quiet determination. The sisters took his hand, their grip tentative but firm, trusting in the strength and honor of the man who had saved them. Not once, but twice from the river and from the treachery of Blood Dot, and so, with the river behind them and the dawn rising above the pines, the three set forth into the Old West, haunted by what had happened, yet guided by courage, trust, and the promise of a new beginning. The golden light of morning stretched across the riverbank, casting long shadows through the swaying pine trees. The river, once a ferocious adversary, now flowed gently over rocks, its icy white froth replaced with smooth ripples reflecting the dawn sky. Marla and June, still wrapped in the warrior's blanket, sat close together, drawing warmth from each other and from the quiet presence of the man who had saved their lives. Their soaked dresses clung to them, but the cold had begun to ebb, leaving only the lingering ache of bruises and rope burns. The warrior's bare chest glistened in the morning sun, muscles taut and bronzed from the previous night's struggle. Long black hair framed his face, slightly damp from the river, and bone, silver, and turquoise tribal jewelry jingled softly as he moved. He knelt between the sisters, scanning the horizon, vigilant despite the calm morning. His dark eyes softened. As he observed the sisters' fragile relief, a quiet strength radiating from every movement. "Are you ready?" he asked gently, voice steady and commanding, carrying both reassurance and quiet authority. Marla and June nodded, still trembling, but with a newfound determination. The river, the ropes, the betrayal, they were memories now, heavy but behind them. Survival had transformed their fear into a cautious courage, and the warrior's presence reminded them that they were no longer powerless. The sisters stood slowly, brushing mud from their dresses, their movements tentative but growing, more confident with each step. The warrior offered his hand again, a gesture of protection and trust, which they took without hesitation. Together, the three of them moved along the riverbank, the gentle morning light glinting on the warrior's tribal jewelry and highlighting his powerful, sinewy frame. Each step away from the river was a step toward a future that, while uncertain, held promise. Marla looked back once at the river, its waters now calm and forgiving. "We made it," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. June squeezed her sister's hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "We're alive. Thanks to him." The warrior's expression softened, a faint smile breaking the stoic lines of his face. There was no need for words. His actions had spoken louder than any speech could dot as they moved into the forested path beyond the riverbank. Birds began to sing their morning songs, and a soft breeze rustled the pine needles overhead. The world of the Old West stretched before them, wild, vast, and untamed, but it also held opportunity, freedom, and the promise of safety that had been absent for too long. The sisters, still shaken but resolute, felt the weight of their brothers. Betrayal lifted slightly with each step, replaced by the courage of survival and the bond forged through shared danger. The warrior guided them to higher ground, where the early sunlight spilled over a small clearing. The grass was dotted with wildflowers, dew sparkling like tiny diamonds. Marla and June sat on the soft earth, taking deep breaths, savoring the warmth and the feeling of safety for the first time in what felt like forever. "We have a chance to start over," the warrior said, voice calm but inspiring. "The past cannot be undone, but the future is yours to shape." For the first time, the sisters dared to imagine what that future might look like: freedom from fear, from betrayal, from violence. They could live without constantly looking over their shoulders, walk in the sunlight without dread, and build lives defined not by their brother's greed, but by their own choices and courage. Marla leaned, her head against June's shoulder, exhaling slowly. "We owe him everything," she murmured. June nodded, her eyes bright with a mixture of gratitude and newfound hope. The warrior's presence was steady, reassuring, and protective, a reminder that strength and honor still existed in a world that could be cruel and unforgiving. The sun rose fully above the horizon, bathing the forest, the river, and the clearing in warm, golden light. Marla and June stood side by side, facing the dawn of a new day, their hearts filled with courage and gratitude. The warrior remained close, a silent guardian, as the sisters took their first steps into a future shaped by survival, hope, and the heroism of a man who had risked everything to save them. The Old West, vast and untamed, stretched out before them. The river, once a harbinger of death, now reflected a new beginning. And as the sisters walked forward, hand in hand with the warrior, they knew that the nightmare of the night would never define them. Instead, their story was one of courage, honor, and a new dawn that promised life, hope, and the freedom to shape their destiny.